Alright, so let's discuss some tips in using color in Photoshop. As we begin to learn to paint, this is going to be really crucial that you understand how to test colors and the various ways that we can control the color we're using. So first of all, in your toolbar you are going to have an option for your foreground and your background color. So as we use various options and tools in Photoshop, you may notice that you have the ability to paint with a foreground or a background color. So with that said, we do have, obviously these that we can just click on, and we're going to be able to test a color at any point. So in this case, we are actually not testing, but we're going to choose a color. And so this color is being based off of the lightness and the darkness of the color values that's currently chosen down here. If you would like to change the hue of the color, you can just change this slider to basically change the color values. So we can change it to a blue, and then you have a darker value or a lighter value. Now picking colors can be a little bit tricky sometimes, so I do want to talk about a few different options here. So you're going to notice that we have different color models that we can choose from. So for example, we could select the RGB option, and you're going to notice this color picker is going to change for us. And then the same thing with lab, and then CMYK is a little bit different. So each of these are going to give you different options for colors to pick from, and so you may find that one is going to be easier than the other. I usually leave it honestly on the H value for HSB. With that said, you will notice also that you have only web colors. So if you're looking for a web safe color, usually we're pretty safe with about 1 million colors, but these colors are said to be tried and true safe for any type of device. In most cases, it's not quite as critical these days. However, you may come into a situation where your color's not matching up to what you need it to be. So that's for web safe colors. And then the other thing is, let's say for instance we really love this purple. You can add any color that you pick to your swatches, and basically what the swatches are going to do is save them so that we can use them later. Let's just name this cool purple. And then right here, add to my current library. If you're using Adobe's cloud service, that's going to save it to your library. I'm actually going to leave that out, and we'll just go ahead and say OK. And then from there, when I say OK, it's going to basically change it to my foreground. Now at any point, you see this little arrow in your toolbar, that's going to allow you to switch your foreground and background color. The other thing that you need to know is the shortcut X will do the same thing. And then another great shortcut for you to know is obviously this little icon here with the default foreground and background, that is going to change it back to normal the way that it was in the beginning. You can go back to the default just by pressing the key D. And when you press D, that basically takes that foreground and background back to the default values. Now, there's always going to be a ton of different ways that we can do things in Photoshop, so ultimately you're going to decide which way is going to be the easiest for you. I've got all my different panels here all in one row, and I use the color panel sometimes when I need to basically be able to choose a color just really quickly on the fly. So you could go that route, or you could go right here. So it's really a matter of you choosing which one is easier for you. This option usually gives you a little bit more options for you to choose from. So let's talk about swatches just a little bit. So the swatches are basically a way that we can save our colors, and so Photoshop has a bunch of different default swatches that are already in there for you. And this top row are active recently used colors. So you will see that that purple color that I chose is right there at the top for us, and it's also right here in my saved swatches. Okay, so that's very useful, and obviously you can, just like with layers, you can create folders and save more colors. So as you start to paint, it may be useful to save some of those colors so that you can come back to them and use them at any given point. Now as we go through, there are going to be instances where you may want to test something outside of Photoshop, or you may want to test from a color. Now you do know that we do have an eyedropper tool, and I'm sitting here looking for it in the many different tools we have to choose from. So it's right here. I honestly never go to this toolbar for my eyedropper. Okay, I am usually holding down the Option key anytime I have a painting tool. And if you hold Option, it activates that eyedropper anytime you're using any type of painting tool. So it also works with like the paint bucket and some other tools like the gradients and stuff like that. So this is going to be really helpful to be able to test colors really quickly. We can test, you know, maybe this tealish blue color. And it's going to pop up, and then we can just, you know, if we want to save this, we can go in and say add to swatches and then say okay and then save it. Now this color that I picked was from a graphic that is clearly, you know, developed and solid with solid color, so it's a lot easier to test from that. You're going to notice that as we test colors, it gets to be really tricky if you just pay attention to that foreground down here. Watch how quickly this changes to different colors. So if we're zoomed in, and I'll try to test a little bit closer to where you guys are, down here looking at this foreground color, there's a million colors probably in this photo because it's a decent resolution image. And so it's made up of a ton of pixels that if we zoom in, we're going to be able to test with more detail. Now in some cases, you may not have the patience to try to get in and test that one pixel because you might notice that it's always off just slightly, and it's really hard to test that one little pixel that you're going for. So although we do cover filters later, I do like to show one filter when we get into color options in Photoshop, and that option is to crystallize. And crystallize is something that I would say you're probably never going to use it in an actual project. However, the larger the cell size is, it's going to make it a lot easier for us to be able to test now. Let me just actually increase that a little bit further. So it basically crystallizes our photo. I'm going to make it super large. And so now it's almost like it's a mosaic, and obviously this is not something I would use for a design, but now when I want to go test a color, these are solid color blocks that when it's time to paint, it's going to be really useful to go in and be able to pick a color. So it might be helpful for you to actually pull photos that have inspiring color for you to test from if you're trying to strive for a certain color that you're using. Now another thing that I like to show with color is sometimes, and you'll see I've got some photos back here, sometimes in Photoshop you're going to want to be able to test a color outside of Photoshop. It might be in an image or maybe in a website. There is a really cool trick that I like to show related to color picking that is basically we're going to hold down Option to activate our eyedropper, and we do not let go. So my mouse is still activated and clicking and dragging, and if you watch my foreground color, okay, don't mind my Photoshop document, but you do see like I'm able to test any color outside of Photoshop. And this is just so useful because this is way more efficient than having to take a screenshot and open it up in Photoshop and then test and go back and forth between documents. The other cool thing is it can be from any application or anything that's on your screen. So you can see I'm actually following along on my screen here, and you can see that I'm testing like different logos. We can actually pull like the color from the Slack logo, and then we've got, you know, Spotify and Yak, so we can actually test colors true to something that's outside of Photoshop like in a split second. So again, the trick is that we've got to hold down Option, click and drag, and just don't let go until we see what we want, and then there's our color that we need. So hopefully that helps you out. There's a lot of great options with color in Photoshop, but you know, there are always, you know, 10 different ways to do just about everything that you want to try to do. So hopefully some of these different options that I've showed you will help you with painting your next project.